Dr. Amy Acton, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This is your first time running for office, right?
This is my first time running for office,
Yeah.
except for student council president
Okay.
in high school.
All right,
That would
we'll count that, certainly. You are certainly no stranger to the rough and tumble world of politics here in Ohio, especially in these times. First question, why do you want to be governor?
You know, Russ, thank you. I am not a stranger to this world. You know, I did work alongside a governor during very difficult times, but I am running for governor because I refuse to look the other way while Ohioans are struggling and we continue to go in the wrong direction as a state. There are special interests, billionaire politicians that I feel have been taking us in the wrong direction. And everywhere I go and listen to people, I have a very special bond with Ohioans that came about through COVID. They share those struggles and they are really asking for change.
During your time as health director, of course, during the pandemic, you became famous across the state, if I can say that, for those 2 o'clock briefings every day. You got a lot of praise from people, you and the governor, for the things you did. You also got a lot of scorn as well as some downright hostility as well. I know people were protesting in front of your house, some anti-Semitic slurs were thrown your way. I got to think there are people in your life who said, Amy, why are you going to do this? Why are you going to run for governor after seeing all that? What do you tell them?
What I tell them is, just what I said, I refuse to look the other way. I have lived a life that has not been easy. You know, people have heard my story. I had a rough childhood, and I think deeply embedded in me was this feeling as a kid. I can remember the people who were afraid when the going was tough, or they see a kid who is a little bit of a dirtball and you don't want your kids to play with them. But I also remember more than anything the people who did see me, that I wasn't invisible to, who didn't give up on me, who gave me that little bit of a hand up. And what I'm worried about in this state is that not every kid is going to get the same opportunities that I had. This is not going to be an easy race. This is not an easy time to try to be a public servant. But we all have to lean in a little bit more to each other. We all have moments where we need to step up.
As you know, some of those hostile feelings, if I can use that word, are still out there.
Yes.
Are you concerned at all about that?
You know, a lot of times people have mistaken, particularly the fact that I stepped down from the position, that it was about the protests. I want to tell you, there were people legitimately protesting, losing a business. You know, there were folks outside my house that I would have loved to have gone outside the door and just talked to and said, what is going on for you? Tell me what we can be doing to make it better. But as you know, there were also AR-15s outside of my house that were deliberately sent there. But that is a small group of people. Russ, my experience of COVID was of Ohioans being heroic in every way possible. People pulling one another up onto life rafts, helping their neighbors, doing an extra shift at the hospital, facing problems we had never faced, and they were doing it together. And in Ohio, we actually flattened the curve. We have data that shows that now, that we did better than neighboring states. And it wasn't what I did alone at all, or a governor does. It was Ohioans coming together. And that memory of that, and what I hear talking to Ohioans everywhere I go, that gives me the courage to be another person out here trying to serve.
We talked about those 2 o'clock press briefings, wine with DeWine, snacking with Acton. As I said, you became a statewide celebrity. What are you most proud of about what you did during that time as health director?
You know, many analyses have been done of our work in Ohio. It was an honor and a privilege to be able to do something in a time like that. That's kind of how I feel now. It is an honor to serve. I feel like I'm a very ordinary person who was in an extraordinary moment. And what I'm proud of is that I was able to be brutally honest at times with people. I knew that there is no one person who can solve. There are no orders you can write to solve every problem we would face. But if I told the truth, which sometimes even included saying when we didn't know an answer. That would allow every Ohioan to lead from where they sat, that you had to run a newsroom and someone else had to run a restaurant and run your family, run your business. I was empowering other people, and that in turn is what made a difference. I think that's how we move forward as a state. We are going backwards on every measure in Ohio, but I believe in empowering individuals and communities, giving them the knowledge they need, bringing people around the table and having the hard conversations. Problems don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. You saw me work on both sides of the aisle to solve some of the hardest problems we were facing. But problems need to be talked about honestly, and then we need to be able to bring people together to solve them.
With the benefit of hindsight, it being
Yes.
2020, is there anything you would have done differently in that time?
You know, I'm very proud of how we handled it, but people don't understand we were following a pandemic playbook that was written by George W. Bush. It went that far back. It was passed from president to president. They had war gamed out. What would you do if you had an entirely susceptible population? So we weren't just winging it. We were following something that had been tested. You would always learn from it, and I've asked over and over again that we study what we did, put those hard truth cards on the table. I'm very proud in Ohio that we made moves early that saved lives, and we also opened early because we actually began an opening plan at the very time we were making some of those hard first decisions. So I am proud of Ohio. Of course, we would learn, and we still need to do a 9/11 style analysis. We're 5 years out now.
Right.
We still need to reflect.
I want to go back on something you said earlier. You had mentioned the fact that a lot of people thought that you would resign your
Yeah.
position as health director because of the protests. But I've heard you say that's not the case. There was some issue between you and the governor in terms of policy. Is that correct?
Yeah, not between the governor and I'd like to say. But yeah, a lot of people assumed, and I think the media covered that, you know, they assumed it was the protesters at my house, but I'd had those threats, I'd had executive protection from when you first saw me in March on. But the truth was we saw a shift occurring. The White House was putting more and more pressure on governments. But for me personally, the pressure was coming from the state legislature, special interests, and particularly the Speaker of the House.
Would have been Larry Householder.
Larry Householder, wanting orders that were not based in science. They were starting to be based in what maybe a lobbyist wanted, or in this case, what someone's wife's fare might want. And for people to understand, for 150 years, the authority for quarantine rested with the health director so that it would not be political, so that it would be used very sparingly to help save lives. And what I worked out with the governor was I would never sleep at night with a Hippocratic oath, signing my name to something that I thought could do harm, but that I would keep advising him, which I did, and I have continued to have a relationship and advise, but that I couldn't do that. And for that work, we earned a Profiling Courage Award. So
That's right. That's
yeah.
right. In these times, the way you look at it right now, when you look at the landscape out there, what's the biggest issue facing Ohioans?
Well, let me tell you, one of the blessings of that time I've spent on air is that I bonded with people, both working for a governor, but even as a doctor. My whole career has been very grassroots-based, community-based work, solving the hardest problems we face, but can only solve collectively, that affect our well-being, whether it be our health or our economic well-being. And what I'm hearing from people is that they are struggling. They don't want to hear the culture wars anymore. They don't want this noise. They want us to address simple things like costs. And that might be the cost of eggs that we're hearing about now, or gas. But it's also childcare, or it's aging in place, but your taxes keep going up. People are talking to me a lot about education. We are a state that invented public education, but right now schools and people who love their schools in 70 counties in Ohio, we only have public schools, and they feel that they feel a threat to that being funded and being excellent. people are talking about safety. And that safety is across the board. It is safety but around crime, but it's fears moms have about their kids doing shooter drills, or it is the hate. People are tired of this feeling of us being pitted against one another and the vitriol. And I have to tell you, in COVID, the experience I had, there were signs that went around going, let's act on love, not hate, kindness, not fear. And I think people are longing for people to just solve problems. They don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. They want you to solve the problems of their day-to-day lives. And they want public service to be about something bigger than us and our jobs or our positions. They want it to make life better with more breathing room.
There are some people who are going to hear this, as you know, they're going to say, that's great. But in these times, that's very difficult. We're in very divisive times these days. You think it's possible for there to be common ground and for all of us to get along in that way? And what gives you that optimism?
You know, I always say I'm a very hopeful person, but hope is optimism with a plan. And we need a strategy in Ohio. Look, our outcomes on every measure in our adult lives, Russ, the past 35 years, let's make it our adult, we'll give you that age.
I'm in.
I'm in. I've watched every measure go down. Our health outcomes used to be some of the best in the country. We do not live as long or healthy lives as all our neighboring states. We are dying of infant mortality and maternal mortality at rates far too great for a state like Ohio. Our education outcomes down. Our gross domestic product, our growth in our GDP is 45th right now, and our biggest export is people, young people. Ohio is capable of so much more than this, but we need a plan. My team is beginning a journey. We are traveling every corner of the state and listening and learning from the best. I have hope. Look, that noise is going to continue in Washington. But I don't care how this outcome turned out. If everyone had gotten everyone they wished for in office, Ohio is still going in the wrong direction because we need to fix the state house. And so that is why I'm running for office. I refuse to look the other way, and I want to do meaningful change that people are asking for.
Let me ask you about a couple things that are in the news, especially today. House Bill 26 has been introduced in the Ohio House. It would basically defund sanctuary cities. And those cities that refuse to comply with the new Trump administration immigration orders would lose their funding as well. A lot to unpack there. I don't know if you've seen it, but as governor, would you sign a bill like that?
I have not seen the bill yet, so that would be something I'd look at. But I think the most important thing is that we know that both sides of the aisle have messed up the border. People are afraid. Like I said, they're afraid of many things, and sometimes it's very easy. We're living in a time where we're constantly creating fear of one another. So one of the things I would most do as governor is refuse to pit people against one another, but talk about what the real solutions are. So as governor, I'd be bringing our mayors together. I'd be bringing the best experts together to look at how we reasonably do this. As you know, there's more to this policy at a national level. So we all know we need to do more on the border. But what we need to do has to absolutely be thinking about the dignity of people here.
Also, the poverty rate in Ohio, more than half of children live in poverty in 4 Ohio cities, East Cleveland, Warren, Youngstown, and Portsmouth. As governor, what would you do about that?
And it is near poverty. And that is absolutely one of the ways we address poverty is by addressing all these issues of cost. But also, as you know, I grew up as a child in poverty in Youngstown. I was homeless in the middle of winter. I experienced abuse and neglect. And that is 1 in 2 children. All the policies we do as governor, whether it's mental health care that we are funding better than we have in the past in the state, when we are addressing a healthy mother so that someone who is pregnant gets all the care they need and they get housing, that is addressing poverty. When we make sure we are not defunding programs like WIC and health insurance so that people can get good prenatal care, That is addressing poverty. When we work on jobs and we think more in economic development about training at every level, not just college, but today I was lucky enough to be out talking to laborers, things that you can do and get a job now, that we have the skills for, that we have the jobs that need filled. All of these determinants, whether they be economic or health or education, are how we ultimately start to address poverty. And it is unacceptable that children don't get a fair start in life. Everyone deserves, and I think people do not care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. We all know that it's only fair that every one of us get a chance at reaching our full potential. And when more people reach their potential, they give those gifts right back. I'm an example of that, and I don't want to leave anyone behind.
Before we came out here, we talked about this marathon that is running for governor.
Running
Election's
for
not
governor.
until November
That's right.
of 2026. You've got to get through a primary before that. But for the sake of this discussion, let's say you're the Democratic
Yes.
nominee for governor. The last Democratic governor in Ohio, I believe, was elected in 2006.
Yes.
Ted Strickland. So, and since then, back then this was a swing state. Now it is not a swing state. It's very red. Why are you convinced that you can become the first Democratic governor
Yes.
elected in Ohio in 20 years?
Well, I am running as an Ohioan, first and foremost, someone who's lived here my entire life. I am a doctor, I am not a politician, and I'm definitely not a political pundit. But what I can tell you is I go everywhere in this state. I am blessed to have a bond with Ohioans on both sides of the aisle and everything in between. And I hear that they are struggling. I hear their challenges. Their challenges are not partisan. They're asking us to be public servants again. They're asking us to put a common purpose and common values, work on the issues that we all hold dear, childcare, aging in place. These are issues we all face. Please focus on these issues, is what they're asking. And that is exactly what I intend to do. Common purpose, common sense solutions of problem solving, and common good. I'm ready to take that on, and I think Ohioans are ready for a change.
I can almost hear one of your opponents in a future debate saying, Dr. Acton, you did a really nice job during the pandemic. You also went too far. You took away some of our basic liberties that people still are upset about. What would you say when that is brought to you?
I will say that we lived through an unprecedented time and nobody went unscathed. We are still recovering, which is why we need good governors. We need good governors to help us heal from all we've endured. But I'm very proud of what Ohio did. We took hard measures. You never want to have to pull that throttle that we had passed from president to president. We had war gamed it. We had to save lives and stabilize our hospitals, and we had to reopen as quickly as we could. And I'm very proud that we worked with schools and we worked with businesses a lot faster than many places in this country. But those were hard times, and leaders have to make hard decisions. I was proud to work beside the governor, and I feel that Ohioans made some amazingly hard decisions, and I'm ready to do that again. Not take away liberties. I believe more than ever, even in what we were doing, we were trying to empower people so that they could make the decisions they needed to make. But together, my job is going to be to help us heal. I have the privilege of having worked alongside a governor. I probably have more experience than about any candidate. Even before COVID, I was fortunate that the governor let me come beside him in ways that worked on a myriad of issues, including an opiate settlement, for example, that we did together. We dealt with harmful algal blooms in the water at the Lake Erie. We dealt with uranium leaking in Piketon, Ohio, Legionella outbreak in a new hospital. I saw the job up close. It was an honor and a privilege to learn. Up close, I've gotten to know all of the past governors, and I feel that my training in solving these kinds of problems makes me well suited for this job.
You were introduced to Ohioans as Dr. Amy Acton, the Director of Health.
Yes.
In many ways, you're reintroducing yourself now as Dr. Amy Acton, candidate for governor.
Yeah.
What do you want people to know about you that perhaps they don't know now?
Well, I have to say it's very unusual that Ohioans kind of got to know me, and I hope you feel this way too, Russ, exactly as I am. I was completely unscripted during those press conferences. You were, for better or worse, getting to know who Amy Acton is. But behind the scenes, when we weren't having wine and stacking with Acton, every hour we were solving things that had never been solved before in this country. Every possible kind of emergency happening. People were dying in March. If you went in the ICU, you had a 1 in 2 chance of dying. By June, that had dropped to just 5% and went down from there. We were solving impossible problems that you couldn't see on air. But what I would want people to know is I fell in love with the people of Ohio. You do not struggle to save lives the way we did and not feel responsible for 11.7 million lives. I'm blessed to have spent my whole life here. Grew up in Youngstown. That has never left me. I'm kind of scrappy. I'm not afraid of challenges. I have faced things from putting myself through med school, working 3 jobs, to being in places like the Bronx where half of my kids were dying of HIV/AIDS at the age of 3, to traveling this world, seeing things, and then coming ultimately to someday be in front of folks at 2 p.m. on the Ohio News Network. But what I do is always the same. I'm a problem solver. I'm a public servant. I gather people around the table from all different sectors to go after the hardest problems that we have to solve in order to become the Ohio that I know we're capable of being.
Dr. Amy Acton, I'm sure we will talk again
Yes.
down the road. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today.
Thank you.